Okay, here we go. Focus. Speed. I am speed. One winner, 42 losers. I eat losers for breakfast. Maybe I should have had breakfast? Brekkie could be good for me. No. Focus. Speed. Faster than fast, quicker than quick. I am lightning. Hello, and welcome to an experiment video where I talk about parts of Dead by Daylight's balance that I've wanted to talk about for quite a while. And today I will be focused on exhaustion. Exhaustion is a status condition that is vital to the game's life and function, as several perks are heavily influenced by it. For those of you that don't know, or only know Dead by Daylight from my shitty videos, exhaustion is a negative status condition that some perks are influenced by. Most of them have an activation condition. When the requirements are met, it activates. An effect, the effect that it causes, and a downtime, a period where the perk can't be activated again. For these perks, the downtime is caused by exhaustion. While exhausted, all but one of the perks that function this way will not activate. The last one is a special thing that I will talk about later. This first section will be dedicated to getting everyone on the same page in regards to how the exhaustion perks work. So I'm going to go down every single perk that exhaustion affects in no particular order, explain how they work, and go from there. I'm going to be starting off with Smash Hit is a teachable perk learnt from Lee Yun-jin from the All Kill chapter. Smash Hit's activation condition is whenever you pallet stun a killer. Its effect is you gain 50% haste for 4 seconds, and its downtime is you gain exhausted for 20 seconds. Here is the perk in action on the map Toba Landing, and as you can see here, this blight is respecting pallets, trying to avoid a stun where possible. So I take this information when I come around to the next pallet here. As you can see, there's a big wall that I can use to block line of sight and mind game him into walking into the pallet, allowing me to drop it on his head, activate Smash Hit, and get much more distance and make it to another pallet than I would have if I hadn't have had the perk at all. Balanced Landing is a teachable perk learnt from Nia Carlson from the Last Breath chapter. Balanced Landing's activation condition is whenever you fall from a height. Its effects are, you gain 50% haste for 3 seconds, your stagger is 75% shorter, and your grunts from falling are 100% quieter, and its downtime is gain exhausted for 40 seconds. Here is the perk in action on the map Treatment Theatre. In this map, the chase will begin here at the main generator, which requires me to get upstairs to activate Balanced Landing. As you see here, I throw this pallet in order to force him to go around or break it to give me more distance, and my goal is to make it to the hole in the upstairs section to activate Balanced Landing off. As you can see here, I do make it. I manage to whip a swing and run around into this room here, trying to make the window, but get cut off partway through. It just continues the chase away from the generators and allows me to control the flow of the chase, not the singularity. Head-On is a perk taught by Jane Romero from the Demise of the Faithful chapter. Head-On's activation condition is a little more complex than most of the others, requiring the following and a fair bit of setup. You have to have entered and remained inside a locker for at least 3 seconds to prime the perk. If you leave the locker preemptively, this resets, and you will need to reprime the perk to activate it again. Then, when you rush out of a locker by holding sprint and then exiting, if the killer is within 2.5 meters of you, the perk then finally activates, and the killer is stunned for 3 seconds. Its downtime then activates if the perk goes off, gaining the exhaustion effect for 40 seconds. Here is a clip of the perk in action on the map Shattered Square. In this clip, Dwight is being hooked right now and I need to make a distraction. So using the perk Deception, I fake into the locker by the shack door, luring the ghost face over to check it first, wasting time for a safe unhook. Ghostface shows up and checks the lockers incorrectly, and then moves to check the other locker where I'm able to secure a hit-on stun, make it out to Shack Pallet, and set up for a strong chase to allow for as much time distracting as possible to enable my teammates to reset, heal, and get back to work on generators, all while he's barely been able to do much of anything in a chase with me. Dramaturgy is a teachable perk belonging to Nicolas Cage from, shocker, the Nicolas Cage chapter. There is a lot to talk about in regards to dramaturgy, so let's start simple. This perk is activated on demand with a single button push. For me, that is the X button. When that button is pushed, a lot happens all at once. The following events occur as the perk's effect. You run knees high, straight ahead in an unchanging angle. While in this animation, you cannot directly impact the cardinal direction you move, and your character's hitbox will phase through the killers in certain situations. After about a second of running high knees, you rocket forward with 25% haste for 2 seconds. Then one of the following 4 effects occur. You either gain 25% haste for 2 seconds again, extending the total time of haste to 4 seconds. You gain a random blue rarity item with a random set of add-ons, so this is a blue flashlight, blue medkit, blue toolbox, blue map, blue key, or blue fog vial. You scream and nothing else happens, or you become exposed for 12 seconds. The same effect cannot roll twice in a row, so after the first time you use this perk, the effects go from a 25% chance of occurring to about a 33.333 repeating percent chance. After all of this, the perk's downtime then activates, and you gain Exhausted for 40 seconds. Here is an example of the perk in action on the map Area of Crows. In this clip, I use Dramaturgy to try and fake out a hit, only for her to not fall for it and take a tag. I then use the distance I gained from being hit to make it all the way down to Shack. Now Dramaturgy gave me a blue flashlight, and so after I vault into Shack and wait so I can see where the spirit's coming from, I whiff the pallet throw, and when spirit goes for the break, I blind her with the flashlight and slip right past her to continue on the chase inside Shack. Overcome is a perk taught by Jonah Vasquez from the A Portrait of a Murder chapter, and unlike a lot of the other perks that I have mentioned and will mention in this video, it functions as more of a safety net than a tool to extend chase, so to speak. Overcome activates when you get hit by the killer, so naturally you need to be healthy to get the full effects of this perk. Then, the speed boost you receive on hit is extended by an additional 2 seconds. You do not gain any haste, the speed boost is just extended. The perk's downtime then activates, and you gain Exhausted for 40 seconds. A nice and easy perk. Here is an example of the perk in action on the map Dead Sands. In this map, I make a very bad misplay against this Ghostface and end up getting tagged super early into the chase with no resources around. But thanks to Overcome, I'm able to make much more distance against him than I would be able to normally, and my lucky break is hiding scratch marks while I'm injured to make it much more powerful and a lot harder for him to track me, allowing me to extend this chase out to much stronger resources, including Shack and everything around it, which just makes this chase much harder for a dedicated M1 killer to fight in. Lithe is a perk taught by Feng Min from the Spark of Madness chapter. Lithe is one of the most consistent exhaustion perks in the game, in my opinion, and it's very simple too. It activates whenever you medium or fast vault a window or pallet, and it simply gives you 50% haste for 3 seconds. Its downtime then exhausts you for 40 seconds. Another nice and easy perk. Here is an example of the perk in action on the map Batten Preschool. Taking this vault here allows me to get a whiff from the Xenomorph's tail whip and make it round to this pallet, which I would have used to drop on her head if she hadn't have gone down that hole and put herself in the hole. She holed herself. This shows Lithe's strengths as being able to force a lot of killers into whiffing attacks, as the sudden burst of speed coming off of vaults makes it much easier for you to force whiffs. Sprint Burst is the exhaustion perk. Taught by Meg Thomas, who comes with Dead by Daylight base, she's one of the original survivors, Sprint Burst has the simplest activation condition of them all. You push the sprint button. When the sprint button is pushed, you gain 50% haste for 3 seconds, and the downtime of becoming exhausted for 40 seconds also activates. It is incredibly simple of a perk to understand the basics of. Here is an example of the perk on the map Fallen Refuge. Here I'm using this double pallet in order to get a pallet stun on the trapper here in order to get Sprint Burst's exhaustion timer down so I can activate it again mid-chase, as you see here. If I did not have Sprint Burst off cooldown, that could have been a down if I'd have stayed in that loop. So it's vital that I broke out of it there, and that's just the beauty of Sprint Burst. If you can get it up in chase again using other perks such as Vigil, Ghost Notes, or even Fixated, it's such a powerful chase tool. Background Player is a teachable perk from Renato Lyra from the Tools of Torment chapter. And this perk is another one of those perks that you have to prime in order to get the full effect. This time, the perk is primed by a survivor being downed by the killer. This perk then primes for 10 seconds, during which you can activate the perk. Like Sprint Burst, you activate this perk by pushing the sprint button, and its effects are very similar. You gain 50% haste for 5 seconds. The downtime here is where things differ, as you only gain exhausted for 20 seconds. Here is an example of the perk in a controlled setting. In this clip, I am stealthing out against the Sadako, while my teammate is taking chase around Shack. I am aware that my teammate will go down if they continue to greed the pallet, so I know that I need to position myself to get ready for a flashbang save that my teammate has so generously given me. Making it around the pallet one more time, I know I need to get in position for the save. He goes down, and as soon as the pickup animation begins, I run by, throw the flashbang, and get as much distance as I can, saving my teammate in the process.
Dead Hard is one of the quirkiest perks in this video. Taught by David King from the A Lullaby for the Dark chapter, it's a weird perk that requires a lot of explanation. This perk primes, once again, under 3 conditions. When you've been unhooked, injured, and are holding the sprint button all at the same time, this perk primes. The perk's activation condition is identical to Dramaturgy's, pushing the active ability 1 button. Then the effect occurs, you dash forward in a straight line, almost a line tackle, for 0.5 seconds. Both sides see this animation occur, and some killers will play around it. During this animation, you gain the Endurance status, and once this animation occurs, the perk's downtime begins and you gain the Exhausted status for 40 seconds.
Here is an example of the perk in action in a controlled setting. In this clip, I am looping this Sadako at Shack incredibly greedily, not throwing this pallet when I really should have. If I didn't have Dead Hard, this would be me getting punished by going down when I make it back round into Shack. But because I have Dead Hard, I'm able to pop it, take a hit, and extend the chase all the way out to a window where there are flashbangs nearby that I wouldn't be able to use, but I'm able to just extend the chase out for much longer than I would be able to otherwise. And finally, for this section, Adrenaline is a perk once again taught by Meg Thomas from the base Dead by Daylight. It's also the odd little exception to the exhaustion perks in that it will always activate even if you are exhausted. This perk activates when the final generator completes and the following conditions occur. If you are downed or injured, heal a health state instantly. Then, gain 50% haste for 3 seconds, and the downtime finally activates, giving you exhausted for 40 seconds.
Here is an example of the perk in action in a controlled environment. In this clip, I am condemned, the Sadako is near me, and the TV is off, and I have no option but to try and loop. Throwing that pallet, I'm aware that my teammate is hovering a generator that is nearly complete. So I run it to main to try and extend it for long enough so that when I do get hit, I'm in a better position to make a mad dash for the exit gate. As you can see here, I greet the pallet, Sadako makes it around, and I get put in a situation where I get tagged. I get hit, and you can see my teammates start working the generator, finishing the repairs and giving me both the speed boost and a health state, forcing her to commit chase to a fully healthy survivor, or forfeit and I get out for free. Utilizing the speed boost, I can extend it out to another pallet, allowing me to get even more distance on her, forcing her to either break or leave the pallet, which either way I'm in a better position. And as I make a mad dash for the exit gate, I take one more tag, and the speed boost allows me to make it all the way down to the exit gate as it is opening, allowing for a magically flawless escape right at the end.
The question of which exhaustion perk is the best is a hard one to answer because all of them have their moments where they can be better than the other options. But a lot of that is out of your hands entirely. You don't get much of a say in a lot of the factors that influences how good an exhaustion perk is, whether it be your team, whether it be the skill of the killer. Sometimes the map influences how good certain perks are. So I'm going to give you advice based on the information you can control. Namely, how skilled are you at Dead by Daylight? Your mechanical skill at looping killers, knowing when to leave a loop and when to run it one more time, and when to throw pallets influences what perk I'd recommend you use. But the biggest advice I can give to someone who is just trying out which exhaustion perks they like is to understand that not every single exhaustion perk will have perfect synergy with the build you are trying to run. If you're running a full healing build, maybe don't use Dead Hard. If you've got a build that relies on you being injured, Dramaturgy might not be a best option. And if you've got a perk build that mostly relies on you playing around loops, Live can throw off how you vault windows and influence how you take approaches, which might not be something that you want in your build playing around loops. So if your build has anti-synergy with the exhaustion perks, you don't need to try and make them work. If you can find a perk that works well in your build, then use it. Additionally, some perks work better in communication than others. For example, if you have a full Swift and you can communicate through Discord or TeamSpeak or whatever platform of your choice, then Head-On suddenly gains a much bigger use in stalling chases and getting locker saves from using Head-On on a killer that's picked up a survivor outside your locker. Head-On gains so much more use in a communication with a full Swift than solo. So if you can get a full Swift together, Head-On might be worth a try, but if you can't, its value goes down quite a bit. But the most important thing of all to remember, exhaustion perks are just a tool to extend the duration of your chases. They're not going to be the be-all and end-all of how you chase. So having a strong understanding of how to have a good chase, regardless of the exhaustion perk you run, is still needed to use these perks effectively. Someone with 20 hours in the game who barely understands much about how the game works fundamentally will get a lot less value out of these perks than someone that has 2,000 hours and knows every killer in and out and how to counter all of them.
Now, not only does every exhaustion perk have synergy with several other perks that I'll get into in a moment, there are other perks that have synergy with the exhausted status. And in the interest of time, I'm going to speed round these perks before I start talking about ideal situations for each exhaustion perk to be used, because I will be mentioning a lot of these perks a fair bit. Blood Rush is a perk from Renato Lyra. It activates when you are unhooked for 60 seconds, and while it is active, you can use the active ability button 1, the same as Dramaturgy and Dead Hard, to remove the exhausted status. It is disabled if you do a conspicuous action, such as repairing a generator, healing, or opening a chest, or cleansing a totem, doing just about anything. Ghost Notes is a perk from V Bunyasak. It activates while you're exhausted, and while you're exhausted, your scratch marks disappear 50% faster. You also recover from exhaustion 10% faster. Iron Will is a perk from Jake Park. This perk I really wouldn't be mentioning under any other situation other than it does have an interaction with the exhausted status. This perk makes your noises of pain silent for absolutely everyone, but if you gain exhausted in any way, the perk deactivates. Rapid Response is a perk from Aurella Rose. This perk activates whenever you gain the exhausted status, revealing the killer's aura to you for 2 seconds. You also gain exhausted whenever you rush out of a locker, meaning it's best used with other exhaustion perks. And Vigil is a perk from Quinton Smith, and makes the duration of blindness, broken, exhausted, exposed, hemorrhage, hindered, mangled, and oblivious decay 66% faster for you and all survivors within 16 meters of you. And if a survivor leaves that 16 meter radius, they keep the effects of the perk for an additional 15 seconds. Now, I didn't have to tell you all this, but these perks will come up a fair bit with a lot of the exhaustion perks, so I figured I'd get them all out of the way now.
So with all of those perks, the other exhaustion-related perks out of the way, let's talk shop, and talk about how I'd rank each of the exhaustion perks mentioned so far. So that's, to recap, Sprint Burst, Live, Balance Landing, Adrenaline, Overcome, Head-On, Smash Hit, Dramaturgy, Dead Hard, and Background Player. In the next section here, I'm going to talk about each perk, some other perks that it works well with, and how I'd rank it on a tier list from S to C. So, As the funny Rabbit Man says,
The darkest pit of hell is open for business.
the bottom three are where I think I will get the most stick in regards to how I've ranked everything, because I have never seen consistency in how the bottom three get ranked. But I'm going to be putting Head On as the worst exhaustion perk for a variety of reasons. Firstly, its effect is somewhat awkward to play against, and incredibly hard to get going with certain killers. Like Dredge, for example, is one of those killers that Head On is nearly impossible to use against effectively, simply due to how his power works. Some killers that have Killer Instinct, that is revealed through lockers, like Killer Instinct always does, is a bit of a double-edged sword. If the perk's charged, it's really strong, not having to bait them over. But if it's not charged, it's just a death wish. Some killers might also wise up if the Killer Instinct reveals you in a locker and try and bait out a head-on stun. And if that happens, well, you're a sitting duck. Secondly, its strength diminishes quite rapidly the less coordinated your team is. Like, a full communicating Swift on comms will be able to get much more value out of this perk than a solo player who has absolutely no idea what the rest of his team is up to. Its strength is based on how coordinated you are, essentially. Head On does have synergy with other perks that use lockers. In my footage, I got value out of the perk Deception, but that is very much a one-and-done sort of combo, and the instant the killer wises up to what perks you have, they will not go anywhere near lockers. However, Quick and Quiet is your better option when going up for Head On, as Quick and Quiet's activation is much more consistent, and you basically can activate it in the middle of chase, getting in a locker while in chase with someone else, and if the survivor runs by your locker, that's a free stun. Additionally, any perk that activates when you enter a locker appreciates having an extra safety net if you get caught out. So perks such as Built to Last and Inner Strength get value from being paired with Head On as well, but it's not really recommended. You don't really want to be getting in a locker right in front of the killer's face with either of those perks. Simply put, due to how stationary Head On makes you and how long it makes you that stationary, it's next to impossible for me to rank Head On any higher than where it is personally. Background Player is a good perk that gets completely overshone by other perks later in the list. The reason it places above Head On is because you can remain very mobile while utilizing this perk, and it has much more consistent use cases in securing stuns from flashlights, pallets, flashbangs, firecrackers, basically anything that can blind. And as seen in the footage from earlier, Flashbang is this perk's bread and butter, enabling you to run in out of nowhere, get a flashy save with a flashbang, and be gone again before the killer can realize what is going on. It can also synergize incredibly well with both Sabotage toolboxes or the perk Saboteur itself, allowing you to make it to hooks much faster than the killer can and break it in their face. Breakout can also find a moderate degree of use with Background Player, as you can catch up to the killer and utilize that additional breakout speed from the survivor on the killer's shoulder. Background Player encourages you to play much more aggressively with saves, and as such, it limits its effective use cases, limiting it from getting all that much higher in my ranking. Smash hit strength is only really as strong as the killer's willingness is to swing through pallets. If your killer plays cautious around pallets, you'll get much less value out of this perk. With that being said, there are a few perks that can help out a lot in supporting smash hit, especially if you're whiffing. 5 moves ahead helps a lot even if you hit or miss the stun, allowing you to move much faster after throwing the pallet. And as much as I dislike the perk myself, windows of opportunity can be used to know what pallets are still standing before chase even starts, and any means necessary can be used to pick up pallets that the killer has refused to break for whatever the reason. However, any perk that requires someone to do something to activate it, let alone a condition like being stunned, makes it hard to rank Smash Hit any higher on its merits alone. It's the same issue that some killer perks have, where they rely on the survivors messing up somewhere, which most good survivor players won't do. Balanced Landings placement is more of a sum of its parts than it being a B tier perk itself, because Balanced Landing is hugely map dependent. On some maps, like Mount Ormond Resort, Midwich Elementary School, and The Game, this perk can probably make it to about A, maybe even high A tier, maybe even low S, due to how frequently it can activate. And while other flatter maps like Fallen Refuge, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and Larry's Memorial Institute do struggle with how frequently they can activate the perk, and how many places there are to activate it. Hell, Leary's has like one elevated place in the entire map that you can activate the perk off. Additionally, Balanced Landing is weird in that the amount of spots you can activate the perk on are dependent on your frames. The lower your frame rate, the more places you can activate the perk with. So some PC players that play on 120 FPS will have spots that just won't activate that they would on with a 60 FPS player. Balanced Landing is also a perk that really doesn't combo into other perks like other perks here do. So the only real perks I can say synergize with Balanced Landing are Vigil, Ghost Notes, and Blood Rush, technically, but you have much better options than dedicating a full build to Balanced Landing simply due to how inconsistent the perk is. This one might be a real showstopper, especially with certain crowds, but I don't rate Dead Hard nearly as much as other people do. Sure, you can see clips on Instagram, Reddit, or Shitter of people going on massive chase extensions with Dead Hard, and these can win games in the right situations. But these people have practiced with Dead Hard, sometimes for literal years. And more importantly, they don't let their nerves get to them. Most people end up firing their shot with Dead Hard a little too early or a little too late, and especially if someone gets the drop on them, most Dead Hard clips just end up looking like this. And it can lose team games if the killer can secure yet another down, which does make Dead Hard a huge risk-reward perk. So naturally, running made for this helps make a killer chasing you even more of a risk for them. And if you're going to be playing around injured to get Dead Hard procs, Resilience is also a big help if you are going to have to play injured to get those Dead Hard clips. Dead Hard's a strong perk, but the sheer requirement to be consistently strong on a player's build is what limits it from going any higher. Adrenaline, like I've said already, is an odd perk, because it's the only exhaustion perk that doesn't care about if you're exhausted or not. So technically, if you can activate another one before the last gen pops, you can run Adrenaline with a second exhaustion perk and get double value. This perk's absolute strength once again lies with team coordination. Your teammates knowing that you have Adrenaline is the most important thing about running Adrenaline, as it's completely possible for you to take a chase, get injured, or even go down, and just in the nick of time, your teammates pop the final generator and the chase extends yet again, potentially even losing the game for the killer if they commit that chase. But there is one perk that I can recommend running with Adrenaline: Rapid Response. If you have no other exhaustion perks, then Rapid Response pops when the last gen's aura pops or when you fast fall out of a locker, meaning you have complete control over when you get the aura read. And adding 2 seconds of aura read on top of healing a health state instantly and getting haste is an incredibly powerful effect. Adrenaline popping mid-chase is a huge momentum changer for both sides no matter how you axe it. But the sole thing keeping Adrenaline from getting any higher is just it spends 90% of the game doing absolutely nothing and you're playing with 3 perks. Dramaturgy is a really awkward perk to rank, because it's got an aspect of randomization in it, but the highs are high and the lows are low, just like most RNG aspects in a game should be. While I can recommend Vigil to go with every single one of the exhaustion perks simply due to how it functions, it's at its absolute best here, as it minimizes an additional effect from Dramaturgy, the chance to be exposed when using it. Additionally, this is a wild reach, but for bonus aura reveal, Streetwise's aura reveal on items obtained by Dramaturgy is a thing. If you exhaust an item's charges that you get from Dramaturgy, you get the 8 seconds of killer aura reveal. It's not much, but you know, it's better than a kick in the teeth. Similar to Balanced Landing, Dramaturgy really doesn't combo well into other perks, but it's a nice perk to have on hand, and if used properly, you can stall the first hit in a chase essentially every single time. There's also some fun techs you can do with the high knees animation, just completely losing your collision, especially around the shack window. It's a powerful perk, but everything above it's just better. On paper, Overcome's strength doesn't seem as high as others, requiring the killer to hit you in order to activate, and requiring the killer to do something was what made Smash Hit one of the weakest exhaustion perks here. But the difference between Smash Hit and Overcome comes down to what the killer has to do. Smash Hit requires the killer to be stunned, which the instant any good killer picks up that you have Smash Hit, they will go out of their way to dodge the stun at every possible chance. Whereas with Overcome, you have to be hit to progress the game state. A killer cannot, in good faith, leave a survivor at full health in chases for any length of time. So, Tagging survivors to take them health states is a necessity, and Overcome just helps make hitting a survivor at the wrong time even more of a punishment than it already is. As for Perk Synergy, this perk combos quite nicely with Lucky Break, allowing you to shoot forward for much longer, break line of sight, and all the while leave 0 scratch marks is incredibly strong. Additionally, Overcome also sees some use in full builds playing around locker hopping, with Lucky Break, Quick and Quiet, Inner Strength, and hell, sometimes Lucky Star seeing some use dependent on the setup that people are going for in their hopper locking. Overcome is an incredibly powerful perk, limited from going any higher just by the requirements of activating the perk, relying on someone else to do it. Taking the silver medal here is Lithe, and I will always say that Lithe is a really strong perk, and if you want to start picking up Exhaustion Perks and seeing how they do, it's probably the one I'd recommend the most. It's a really strong perk with really good synergies, but it still remains limited by requiring a pallet or window vault to activate properly. Lithe synergizes very well, sometimes annoyingly so, with Finesse, and the stereotype of 60 to 80 hour Fung Min players running Lithe and Windows of Opportunity exists for a reason. It's a good working man's exhaustion perk, very reliable and good synergy with a lot of really common perks, but of course, there's still one perk stronger. And what else could be the top dog but the original? Sprint Burst remains one of the most consistent exhaustion perks in the game. The same power as Lithe, the same downtime as Lithe, but much more consistent to activate essentially on demand. And of course, where there's a Sprint Burst, its best friend Fixated is seldom far behind. And as a final hurrah to prevent being chased off hook and going down again, Blood Rush is at its absolute strength when paired with Sprint Burst, allowing for absolutely insane distance from most killers as long as you don't do a conspicuous action. I mean, there's not really much else to say. Sprint Burst is one of the most consistently powerful exhaustion perks for minimal input from the survivor using it. It's a really good perk. So, when's the best time to use an exhaustion perk? Well, that really depends on how you play the game. If you like to play aggressively for flashlight saves, give background player a try. If you like to be a nuisance for the killer, hit on for stunning, dead hard for extending chases, hell, even overcome for breaking chases early might be worth a try. Do you like staying as far away from the killer as physically possible? Sprint Burst might be your friend. But just because I've ranked Sprint Burst as the best exhaustion perk doesn't mean that you can't use the other options. Hell, I prefer Lithe over Sprint Burst personally, but I acknowledge that Sprint Burst is just a more consistent perk than Lithe. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't at least try the others and see how you like them. Because, well, you may not like how you play with Sprint Burst, but you might discover while trying out the exhaustion perks that you quite like how it feels to play with Overcome. Hell, I used to play with Overcome quite frequently. And most importantly of all, use what perks you find fun for your playstyle. Your playstyle might be completely different from someone else, so I can't in good standing recommend you 100% of the time to use any perk, because you just might not like how that perk encourages a playstyle of, and that's entirely okay. But remember, every exhaustion perk has a use case, and it's up to you to determine if your playstyle, skill level, and team composition is worth using one exhaustion perk over another, or if the other options are just better. So, to answer the second question of which exhaustion perk is the best to use, the best exhaustion perk to use is whatever one you like the most that works the best with your build. For some people, that's dead hard. For others, it's dramaturgy. For me, it's alive. But what's most important when choosing it is that you're having fun and you enjoy using it. Because at the end of the day, Dead by Daylight is just a game, no matter how seriously people take it, and having fun is the most important part of playing any game. Thanks for watching.